Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Catherine and this is Raspberry Reads. So today we are finally through the month of March and I'm going to do my March wrap-up. I had a pretty good reading month for me. I read 6 books, which is more than I would normally get through. And it was a really interesting mix of audiobooks or ebooks and physical copies. So yeah, without further ado, let's just jump right into it because I've got quite a lot to say. So firstly, I should mention that I'm not going to hold anything up because I only read one physical book, and so just for ease, I'm just going to pop up pictures on the screen afterwards when I'm editing. Yeah, so the first book is Last Night in Montreal by Emily St. John Mandel, and Emily St. John Mandel is a Canadian author. And I'll start by saying that I read this on audiobook and it was narrated by Alyssa Brennahan, I think is how you say it. And I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and I'll go through and explain why I gave that rating. So first of all, I enjoyed the narration. I thought that Bresnahan, oh, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but I thought that she did a very good job at narrating, particularly pronouncing some of the French or French-Canadian dialogue that was included. And I thought that the characters were interesting, and generally it was sort of like a medium-paced book, but the only problem that I felt is that it was good in the beginning and it was good in the end, and then there was a sort of dip in the middle where I really lost interest, and then so that partly explains why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It's just because I lost interest in the middle. But yeah, so this book is I guess literary fiction, and it's about a young woman named Lillian, and she is a very unsettled soul. So you learn that she has traveled quite a lot as a child and often had different identities, and that her and her father were actually being followed by a private detective. And so as the story unfolds, you eventually learn why it is that they were on the run, why Lillian has this sort of wandering spirit, and you also sort of get to see different perspectives of the private investigator and a few other characters. So basically the premise, without giving too much away, is that Lillian is in New York, and she has a boyfriend there called Eley. I think that is Eley or Eley? Eley. You know, they're doing well, and all of a sudden she gets itchy feet, and so she ups and leaves. And Eley ends up tracking her down to Montreal, and well, he's trying to find her anyways, and so he goes to Montreal, and so most of the book is set there. Interestingly, I thought that there were quite a few parallels to the film Chocolat with Johnny Depp, in the character Vianne, the main female protagonist in that she can't settle, and sort of the wind picks up and she has to move on. And yeah, I got a similar vibe to that. And also coincidentally, I was listening to this book alongside with reading another book, which I'll talk about in a minute, and both of them very heavily focused on linguistics. So Eley, in the story, he is an academic in linguistics, I believe. And so that was just an interesting sort of connection, that I was reading 2 books at the same time talking about etymology. So overall, I wouldn't say that this is my favorite book by Emily St. John Mandel. I really loved Station 11. It's dystopian, and that's my jam. Then I read The Glass Hotel, and I didn't really get on with that one too much. And then I tried to read Sea of Tranquility and actually gave up on it, but I'm determined to get to it again. And so after I'd stopped Sea of Tranquility, I wanted to try again with Emily St. John Mandel, and picked up this one, which I think might have been her first book. I could be wrong about that. But this is very different in style from Station 11, and yeah, I enjoyed it. So it's just all around, it was an interesting read, but as I mentioned, dragged a little bit. Yeah, so for that reason, it was 3 out of 5 stars. Next up was the book that I just mentioned about similarities with linguistics. So that's The Liar's Dictionary by Eley Williams, and this was her debut novel that came out a few years ago, I think. And I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. So for me, that's a really good book, a high rating. I thought it was funny. I thought that there were great characters in it. I loved that there were dual timelines, and I liked that there was queer representation in it. So this book, and my copy is actually downstairs, and it was actually the copy that I gifted to my dad a few years ago, and he enjoyed it. And when I was clearing out his belongings after he passed, I found this copy still on his bookshelf, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to take that home for sentimental reasons, but also I haven't read it, so let's see if it was good, because it would be horrible if I gave my dad a book that was not good. But I'm pleased to say that I actually really enjoyed it, and so yeah, it's going to stay on my shelf forevermore. Yeah, so this book is a tricky one to explain. So it's set in 2 time periods, so and it's set at a dictionary publishers called Stanby's. And so in the modern period, you have a woman named Mallory, and Mallory is an intern at Stanby's, and you don't quite understand what it is that she does all day there, but at some point you end up finding out that she needs to look through the digitized versions of the dictionary to look for mount weasels. And mount weasels are fictitious words that are placed in the dictionary, you know, back in the day. Well, maybe not back in the day. If you work in dictionaries, these things still exist, but to my understanding, they were used back in the day to avoid plagiarism. So people just like copying out dictionaries and publishing them under a different name. So yeah, she's looking for mount weasels. And then there's another time period, which is in the Victorian period, at the end of the 19th century. And this looks at Peter Wentworth, and he is a lexicographer at Swansby's, and he is in charge of looking at the letter S. And yeah, without giving too much away, it's sort of like his story and Mallory's story and how they kind of come together across time periods. I thought it was really well written, quite witty. I, for the most part, enjoyed the linguistics and etymology and the sort of meditation on language, and how it was very playfully written in places. Sometimes I felt like it was maybe too much, like too much detail. In particular, my only criticism, I would say, is I really didn't like the prologue. It was so boring. So yeah, I thought that maybe it could have been written in a different way or just not included at all. I think just a short précis explaining the gist of the dictionary publishing industry would have been fine. But yeah, so yeah, overall, I thought it was a great story. As I mentioned, there's queer rep, and I really liked the sort of exploration of Mallory's identity as a queer woman. Yes, so yeah, The Liar's Dictionary by Eley Williams, 4 out of 5 stars from me. Okay, next up is a book that I actually gave 5 out of 5 stars, which I very rarely do. So that just shows how much I loved it. And that was Shift by Howey. And this is the second book in the Silo trilogy, the first one being Wool. And there's one that when I was reading it on ebook, which was actually quite a tricky thing to do because it's a long book, and so reading it on my phone as an ebook probably wasn't the best idea. But in any case, as I was reading it, there was a quote that I saw which just, I think, encapsulates the ambiance of the book, or the vibe of the book. So it was supposed to be people who died and cultures that lasted. Now it was the other way around. So that just gives you sort of a sense of the tone of the book. And it's dystopian sci-fi, and if you would need to read Wool, the first one in this trilogy, for it to make much sense, I would say. But so yes, the second one, Shift, it looks at how the silos came to be. So for context, this dystopian setting is people living in underground silos, like towers, but underground. And you sort of begin to understand why it is that they're living there, and how this whole setup came to be. Sorry, I'm very croaky today. I really liked the characters in it. I thought it was great that it covered sort of the overlap with the first book as you revisit certain characters. I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to spoil it. But yeah, I thought it was really tense. There were some points where I just got this like real sinking feeling, and just how you can imagine how awful it would be to be in that situation. So yeah, in terms of world building, I thought Hugh Howey did a perfect job. And yeah, the only thing else I would say is that I don't really want to say too much. It's best with, in my opinion, it's best with these types of dystopian pieces to kind of go in blind. You don't want to know too much about what's going on, because part of the appeal of this book is that I didn't know what was coming, and so I enjoyed learning, what does the title mean, how does it relate to the first book, etc. So yes, 5 out of 5 stars for Shift from Hugh Howey. I will get to the next one soon. I want to give myself a little break to digest it a bit. And then I think I might borrow the physical copy from my father-in-law rather than read it as an ebook, because yeah, that was hard going reading it on a tiny screen. Next up we have an audiobook, and this is The Dentist by Tim Sullivan, and it was narrated by John Heffernan. And the reason why I read this book or listened to it is because my mom recommended it to me. She tends to predominantly listen to audiobooks rather than read. And we have similar tastes in that we both like sort of police detective stories and historical fiction. So yes, this one I gave 3 out of 5 stars, and overall I enjoyed it. I thought that the sort of mystery around the police investigation was interesting. And it's basically about a homeless man being strangled, and then they're trying to investigate as to why this is, and it has to do with the man's past. And what is, I don't want to say innovative, because I'm not sure of how common this trope is, I guess, but what is a little bit different about this series is that the main character, D.S. George Cross, is autistic. So he has, is defined as Asperger's, but he's on the autistic spectrum condition, and in that sense he gives a very unique perspective to detective work. And the main problem that I had with this book, and I should caveat that I work in sort of with disabilities, and I just didn't like how much emphasis was placed on the characteristics or his mannerisms to do with his Asperger's. It felt a little bit like a broken record. You sort of have the narration and the story, and then it'd be like, oh yes, and he is this way because he has Asperger's, and it was a bit over the top for my taste. I understand perhaps why that is because it's the first book in the series, so the author Tim Sullivan is introducing us to his main character, and so in that sense, in order to sort of continue in the series and showcase D.S. Cross's strengths as a police detective, he needs to kind of lay the scene for him having autistic spectrum condition, but again, at times I just found it distracting and annoying how much he's sort of harping on about the fact that he has Asperger's. So yeah, in that sense, I enjoyed the book, but I probably won't continue with the series because I didn't connect enough with the character or the writing style to think that it's worthwhile to keep going. But yeah, it was a decent police thriller, police mystery. So if you're looking for a new series to try, maybe check it out, purely for the fact that it's got some disability representation, which is perhaps a little bit different. All right, moving on. So the next book, which was an interesting choice for me, and this is Acts of Service by Lillian Fishman. And I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars, although that's being pretty generous, I would say. So this is about a woman exploring her sexuality and queerness, I suppose. And the reason why I picked it up is because it was labeled as LGBTQ+, so I wanted it for the queer representation. And I also had heard, you know, as the title suggests, that there might have been some steamy scenes, and there were. Like, I'm not going to fault it for that. However, and here's my laundry list of things that I didn't like, and I'm going to refer to my notes. So, first point is all of the characters, I think, yeah, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. All of the characters were detestable and insufferable. These are just horrible humans. They're self-absorbed, just really like navel gazing. Yeah, just not very nice people. Even the characters that you feel sorry for, you subsequently don't feel sorry for because they're also terrible people. And the second reason why I didn't like this is because, as I mentioned, I wanted to read it because it was supposed to be queer. And although the main character, I believe, is bisexual, very little of this book actually includes anything queer at all. It's mainly about 2 women who are obsessed with a man, and most of the steamy scenes are between a man and a woman. And there's also an element of a sort of love triangle or a relationship with 3 people in it. But again, the focus is on how both women are obsessed with the man. So yeah, I would say that the steamy scenes, for the most part, came across as very heterosexual and very controlling from the man's point of view. And if that's your jam, then I'm sure you'll love it, but it wasn't really for me. I saw some comments afterwards, some reviews that said that this book is like Sally Rooney meets 50 Shades of Grey, and I would agree with that. I haven't read Sally Rooney or 50 Shades of Grey, but I know enough about them to feel that that's an accurate description. And somebody else said that it was like the show Girls by Lena Dunham, and that I have seen, and yes, I would say it's like that. Another person had a very fair point in criticism in that it's from a white, privileged, cisgender perspective. These are all fairly entitled people, you know, fairly well off, and their only problems in life seem to be that they are bored with their sex lives and want fulfillment somewhere else. And I just, yeah, that's very surface level and doesn't really do it for me. I also found the discussions of feminism highly problematic. Obviously, there's lots of different perspectives and interpretations of feminism, but yeah, in my view, a book basically entirely about a woman obsessed with a man and how she likes that he controls him isn't very feminist, in my opinion. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And the only reason I did that is because the writing's actually really good. And so I did finish it. It had some interesting things to say. It was a well-polished piece of fiction in my view, but if you are looking for a saucy book that explores queer representation, I wouldn't bother with this one. Yeah, so that's Acts of Service by Lillian Fishman. And last but certainly not least, and this was quite the task to finish, is Wastelands, the true story of Farm County on Trial by Corban Addison. And this was, I listened to it as an audiobook, and it was narrated by Rob Shapiro. And I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. So this is a true story. What I liked about it is that, so it's about a law case, or a set of legal cases in North Carolina to do with hog farming. And so this is a true story. But the way that Corban Addison approached it is he told it as if it was a narration or a piece of fiction. And I think that worked really well. So this is similar to like Aaron Brockovich. So if you like that sort of thing, to do with sort of public justice and inequalities and health concerns for the local community, and like the perspective of the plaintiffs, then I'm sure you would enjoy this. I would say that listening to it on audiobook was a little bit tricky. So it was 16 hours and I was listening to it a bit faster than just, I think it was like 1.4 speed, something like that. But yeah, the narrator, Rob Shapiro, the thing that bothered me is that he mispronounced a lot of words. Sometimes you've only read a word, and so you just have to make your own assumption about how you pronounce it, and that's absolutely fine. But he did it enough with words that if your profession is a narrator, you should probably check how to pronounce those words before you record yourself. So yeah, there were enough mispronounced words that I found it irritating, and I sort of lost track of what was actually going on in the story. So that's why from the audio format I deducted marks, so to speak. But I just thought that this was a really interesting account of environmental racism, and basically in that area of North Carolina, the majority of the neighbors of these massive hog farms that are impacted are lower class Black individuals. And it's nice that you know going into it, and obviously you could just look up on Wikipedia, but you know going into it that this is a success story. So I think this was one of the highest payouts in North Carolina for a nuisance case. So basically all the legal action was based on the premise that the hog farms were nuisances to the neighbors in terms of spraying pig feces and urine, in air particles, pollutions, health issues, that sort of thing. I think later in the book, they did go into it in a little bit more detail, but I felt the first part of the book didn't go too much into the health and well-being of the animals. And at the end of the day, these hogs, they're livestock, they're raised for meat, but I think most people would say that you need to have a decent standard of living for raising those hogs. Wilbur, sorry, the dog is whining. Their environment needs to be sanitary, and to the point that it's not causing stress for them. And towards the end of the book, they did cover in the courtroom, the judge did pick up on the fact that the living conditions for some of the hogs were not sanitary. Right, sorry, I just had to pause my recording because I've got a window cleaner here, so I'm going to try and wrap this up before he comes and makes a lot of noise by this window. So yes, Wastelands I think is a really worthwhile read. I would probably say maybe read it rather than listen to the audiobook. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really gripping, a worthwhile topic to know more about. The only thing that I found disappointing is when I looked on Wikipedia, as far as I know, after that large settlement payout because of the North Carolina hog farms, so as far as I'm aware, several states subsequently have changed their laws so that you can't file a nuisance claim against the agricultural industry to sort of protect the industry, which, you know, I'm sure there's lots of differing opinions on that, but from the perspective of individuals who need to live next to these large-scale farms, it's probably not the best for them. So yeah, those are the 6 books that I read in March. Have you read any of these books? If so, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. And otherwise, let me know what you read in March. Were there any books that you really enjoyed and you think that I would enjoy them as well? If so, let me know. And equally, if there were books that you just didn't get on with, I'd like to know about those too. And so with that being said, I hope you're all doing well. I hope you had an enjoyable Easter if you celebrate, and I look forward to seeing you soon in a new video.